Here we go. Could the Russians take Ukraine's second city? Moscow reopening a new front with the taking of villages near Kharkiv since last Friday. Could fresh ammo and military hardware pledged by NATO allies arrive too late for the Ukrainians? Moscow's spring offensive taking form as Vladimir Putin replaces Defense Minister Sergei Shoigu with another Kremlin loyalist, Andrei Belousov, the Deputy Prime Minister in charge of the economy up to now. Why the reshuffle? In a nation that's fully embraced the transition to a war economy, what prospects as Russia's president embarks on a fifth term? What prospects for an outmanned and outgunned Ukraine, which for the sake of its own survival can neither afford to keep fighting nor to embrace peace on Putin's terms? Today in the France 24 debate, we're looking at Russia that is on the offensive. Joining us from the Black Sea port city of Odessa, Hannah Shelest, Director of Security Programs for the Ukrainian PRISM think tank. Thanks for being with us.
Thank you for the invitation.
Anton Kozlov is the Director for the International Center for the Study of Eurasia. Welcome back to the show. Thank you. Welcome back as well to Michel Benamou, Executive Director of the OPY think tank, which is, how would you call
OPY, you might say.
OPY, excuse me. I used the acronym in French there. Your reactions on the hashtag F24debate. It's being described as a significant ground offensive. Ukraine's president stating his forces are locked in, quote, fierce battle. His general staff admits tactical successes on the part of the Russians this Monday. Matthew Mary-Cauchet has more.
As Russian forces approached, Ukrainian police worked to evacuate civilians from the small border village. Russia says it captured at least 9 villages over the weekend, and local authorities say thousands of people have fled.
I was in the house and they opened fire at the door, and that's it. I'm being sent to a hospital in Kharkiv. I have no fingers. They're broken.
Ukraine's military chased Russian troops out of most of the Kharkiv region nearly 2 years ago. But with Russia's launch of a new armored ground attack, the front in northeastern Ukraine has reopened.
Russians are conducting so-called meat assaults. They're sending people to their deaths. They die, and their places are instantly taken by others and others and others. Human life is the cheapest thing in the Russian Federation, the very cheapest. They don't value the lives of their soldiers at all.
The new offensive means Russia could move its artillery within range of Kharkiv and renew the shelling of Ukraine's second largest city. Russia may also be able to create a buffer zone to stop the frequent Ukrainian drone attacks on Russian targets. In addition, the offensive will force Ukrainian forces to shift limited manpower away from the front in Donbass, where Moscow's troops are gaining ground.
The attacks in the Kharkiv region are intended to stretch our forces and undermine the morale and motivation for Ukrainians to defend themselves.
Another reason for Russia's new assault is to exploit Ukrainian ammo shortages. Although the United States recently announced new aid packages and weapons shipments, some of it may take days or weeks to arrive.
And we can also welcome to our conversation from Kharkiv, Dmytro Kutovyi, co-founder of the Kharkiv Media Hub. Welcome to the France 24 debate.
Yes. Hello, everyone. Yes, I'm very glad to take a part on this.
And how's your Monday been? How are things in Kharkiv?
It was a hard day. It was the fourth day after the Russian started the new operation on the border of Ukraine. And all these days we've been in nearby the city of Vovchansk and helped to our friends from NGOs and from volunteers. And we took part in mission of evacuation of citizens of city of Vovchansk, and also we helped journalists to work there.
Nearly 6,000 civilians who've been evacuated. The Russians, since Friday, have said to have taken several dozen square kilometers. Was this something you personally expected?
You see, as you want to know my opinion, so I would like to clarify a way that the limits of my competitions will not allow me to comment professionally just tactic of military operation, but were we ready for a possible expansion of the front and attempts to reoccupy the Kharkiv region? Yes. We were prepared for as much as we can be prepared for in the third year of this war. But it was the second time when Russia tried to occupy our territory. And I do not think that I was ready for it. I was ready for just massive shelling of civilians in the cities and villages nearby the border of Ukraine. But it's emotional. But in real life, yes, we were prepared to this. And the 5,700 people were evacuated from a few districts of Kharkiv region during this 4 days. And tomorrow we will start the new day with a mission of evacuate too.
Evacuate more people. Dmytro, just tell us, because Kharkiv has been the subject of a lot of shelling throughout the winter. Pre-war, there was one census, population was 1.7 million. What's it like in the city?
Look, the population before the full scale war started was more. The day population was more than 2 million. Then we lived in a short period when the city was almost empty. It was maybe 300, maybe 400,000 people in Kharkiv. And starting from the summer of 2023, people started to came back. And before this Friday, the city lived like almost like normal life, because we absolutely understand that we are in the war, but we try to do all our job, and all our activities are continuing now. And even during these days, the situation is, as for me, is absolutely normal. No panic in the city, no panic in the region, and just a few districts nearby the border needs to be evacuated some people from them, from this territory, because we understand that it's just a question of life, because every day Russia's using all kinds of weapons, trying to make a new gray zone nearby the border of Ukraine. So just the president, so-called president of so-called Russia Federation, said about this. Absolutely, he said that their goal is to make a gray zone in our border.
And that's what you've been experiencing. Hannah Shelest, you're in Odessa, the other end of the country. It's been hit with a succession of strikes, including 2 weeks ago, the one against the seaside manor, known to locals as Kivilov's castle. Listening just there to Dmytro Kutovyi, and as winter has turned to spring and spring turns to summer, what's the feeling?
Feeling that Russians are definitely trying to wider, even already quite a stretch front line. If we've been talking about almost 2,000 kilometers, we understand how difficult it is to keep control and defense of this line, especially when we were limited in ammunition. And considering that even with this limited ammunition, Ukraine managed to target where it was possible in Crimea and to push in some places on the southern flank, for Russians it was very important to open at least some additional front. And here, because Kharkiv is so close to the border, technically, logistically, that definitely was easier for them to do. So de facto, while Ukraine is waiting for the deliveries of the ammunition after the adoption by the US Congress of the finally adoption of the military support, Russia is trying to use this window of opportunity as much as possible to advance, to gain something before it would be much more difficult for them to do. And in this case, that was quite expectable because we saw that the last weeks Russian armed forces been gathering additional forces, ammunition, they were building fortification exactly there on the northeast of Ukraine. And because they were not able to do anything on the south in the Kherson region, where they also had some plans, they decided that that would be probably the easiest way for them. At the same time, they continued their missiles attacks against the energy infrastructure. That's also taking a lot of energy. And even in Odessa, that it is so far from Kharkiv, but today we had 3 air raids and 2 attacks. One intercepted, another one looks as well. At least we don't have any bad news by now. So you understand that they are really trying not to allow Ukrainian forces to concentrate on one battle, and they are spreading our forces as much as possible.
All right, Hannah, we're going to call up a map to show that, because the focus has been on the northeast since last Friday. 3 villages seized by the Russians on Sunday. The Ukrainians admitting this Monday that the enemies achieved, quote, partial success in the village of Lukyansky. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. Lukyantsy, that you can that you see there on the map, just next to the border. How strategic are these locations? How much success is it so far? Your thoughts on that, Hannah?
First of all, the battlefield currently over there is very, it's not flexible, that's not a proper word, but it's changing hourly. If in the morning we had bad news that the Russian forces were coming to Volchansk, so now, for example, just before the interview, I've been reading the news, and the news are already that we are pushing them back. So we need to understand that overnight the situation can be changing. But if we look over there, none of these villages are that strategically important. They are important tactically, they are important psychologically, that Russians managed to do it. They are important in terms of stretching of the forces, but none of them are controlling, for example, railway or important road that will cut forces or do something like this. Plus, we need to understand that Kharkiv city itself, it is the huge city, is more than 1 million people. It is highly residential with the skyscrapers, so it is very difficult for occupation. And Russia doesn't have, even with those increased forces at the border, it's not enough to occupy the city and to control it. However, coming closer after the border allow Russians to use different types of the ammunition and artillery, because with each push that we had in 2022 and beginning of 2023, that was possible to push Russian artillery out of Kharkiv. And for example, those artillery that is for 40 kilometers, that is exactly to the border. Yep. The more you push them, the less possibility to use these undiscriminatory artillery against the civilian population of the Kharkiv.
Yeah, artillery against which anti-aircraft fire is not much use. Just one quick technical question there, Hannah. How well protected was the border? Was it mined the way that we see the heavy mining in the east and southeast of the country?
As far as we heard now, and there are unfortunately very different news are coming, maybe because it is different parts of the border had different situation. For the last year, there were some works done with the trenches, with the additional forces, with some mining. However, because this line was under the constant artillery shell from the Russian side and the airplanes coming, so it was very difficult to build really significant and constant protection as we would like, or what is currently built, for example, around Zaporizhia. The reason is that it was just physically dangerous to bring there, for example, heavy equipment or some additional equipment necessary for this. That's why there are questions now to those responsible in some of the towns. Even in the Kharkiv region, we hear it from journalists, we hear this from military and activists, but I think that we will need at least several days before
to get a clearer picture on that. Michel Benamou.
Yes, I disagree with Anna a little bit on this. I think that the Ukrainians are paying the price of the strategy of last year, going full counteroffensive and not focusing on defense at the end of 2023. What we have in terms of defense north of Kharkiv seems to be very scattered spots, defense spots with trenches and mines, but nothing that is organized like the Russians have done last year with 3 lines of defense. It seems that Ukrainians have not done this and that they may pay the price for it and have Russian army, the Russian artillery and tanks coming close to Kharkiv to the point of shelling Kharkiv in a more brutal manner than they have already.
Dmitry Kutovi, what did you see when you went near the border?
Yeah, it's very interesting to hear this opinion. So I'm absolutely not agree with you because we prepared to this offensive and we understand that it could be, and we're not only talking about this. But at first, I have to specify that we cannot say about occupation of north part of Kharkiv region, because as today said the head of our military, state military administration, he said that really 5 people in the forest is not occupation. So I have to specify that this village is now under fighting. So we're fighting in these villages. I'm saying this not like just journalist. I'm saying this like a man who've been there yesterday, been there in Saturday, in Friday, and today. So the first.
But one does not contradict the other, Dmitry Kutovia. What you're saying about the pushback has been confirmed by a lot of sources. But the question is, was there a tactical mistake previously by not buttressing defenses?
No. I do not think that it was some tactical problem. I think that we have to understand that regarding the information about the absence of mines in the border, for example, or some problem with our defense structures and fortification lines. So it's a part of a big information and psychological campaign by Russia. Because I've been many times in positions of our militaries, and I have to specify that military is responsible for their own positions, for their own needs, and which they build on the front lines of defense. I'm absolutely agree with my colleague from Odessa when she said that it's very dangerous
and difficult to build those trenches. Michel Benamou.
Yes, but yes, we built not only the first line, we built also a second and third line, and we really preparing to this offensive. And look, we try to understand, and you have to try to understand that 10 years of this war allow us to understand that no trenches, no mining, no structures cannot defend us from all kind of problem. It's a war, and in this war, during just yesterday, 3 times, 3 groups of Russians were involved chance, and we pushed them back
3 times.
And today,
Michel Benamou. Let me bring in Michel Benamou on this. Go ahead.
I understand your position, sir. Just as a former military myself, just looking at maps, you see that the slope is downhill, that the terrain is very flat. So this attack from Kharkiv has a good tactical layout for the Russians. I agree with Anna now when she says that they don't have enough troops to actually invade Kharkiv. Anna is right. I think the Russians need at least 50,000 troops to occupy Kharkiv, and I don't think they want to do that. What they want to do, one
at a time. One at a time, Dimitro.
I think what they want to do is
it's very funny.
One at a time. Wait, no, please. Let Michel finish. Go ahead, Michel.
I think what they want to do is inflict damage on the Kharkiv population, create a refugee wave. which will be difficult to handle for Kyiv and also for us Europeans, and be in a negotiating position next year with the Americans to negotiate a ceasefire settlement with Ukraine. I think this is the purpose. And also distract forces from the rest of Ukraine. We see that already now. A lot of ammos which were supposed to go to the south of Ukraine and to the central east of Ukraine are now going north of Ukraine. They're not going to Avdiivka, they're not going to Mykolaiv as before, they are going to Kharkiv, which is a real problem for troops in the south and in the center. So yes, it is a push. I don't think myself that everything is going to collapse. I think Ukrainians are resilient. I think they can take this, but it's a difficult shock to absorb. And it's quite likely that the Russians will keep advancing in the next couple of weeks and months.
All right, by the way, Ukraine hitting back. The death toll has climbed to 15 after the partial collapse of an apartment building in the Russian city of Belgorod, which has been repeatedly, Belgorod, a city which has been repeatedly shelled over the last few months. While more than 900 kilometers from Ukraine's border, the giant Lukoil refinery in Volgograd partially shut down for the second time this year after another drone attack that took place there. So Ukraine is not sitting idle. Anton Kozlov, are we going to remain in a war of attrition and with a front line that doesn't move much, or could things change?
I think we will be more or less in the same situation, because I agree with Michelle and with Hanna. Russians will not take Kharkov. They don't have enough force. It's going to be, if they decide to do so, it's going to be a very bloody battle, because, I mean, imagine the city of 2 million people. I mean, it's huge. So I don't think, even though they say Kharkov is a Russian city, blah, blah, blah. No, they're not going to take. They want to create what they call the buffer zone in order to protect Russia from Ukrainian shelling, and that might be the purpose. And I also agree that unless there is some kind of a deal, Kharkov is not going to be taken by Russia.
Is this all just a prelude? Now, the question, Hannah Celeste, is the Ukrainians are waiting for this aid that's been promised in the last weeks. The Americans saying that now that Congress has given a green light, are we starting yet to see that they said the military aid would start arriving almost immediately, a matter of days? Are we seeing any effects of it yet?
Yes, we already see the effects, and we know that the first bunch of ammunition already arrived in Ukraine, and immediately we started to have the positive news from the different brigades, and that really helped them to change the situation in some of the places, or at least better defense. Even that the biggest amount is now coming, so it is in the process. Plus, don't forget that in the beginning of June, we would receive so-called Czech initiative. Those 300,000 of ammunition ordered and found by the Czech government, plus F-16. So all of these would slightly changing the situation. However, I would like to make two small points. It seems to me that everybody is saying about how Ukraine backed from Kharkiv region villages. But if you look to the numbers of dead Russians that each morning we have in the publications, so today the number was twice more than average within the previous months. And usually these numbers is those whom we can confirm physically, visually. It is the very serious process of identification. So if usually we had last month 500, 800 per day, so this morning the news was 1,700. That also demonstrates that Ukrainians are not just coming back, that it is the very serious battle happening there. And sometimes getting out from some villages, it can be the tactically important decision just to get rid of the forces. However, also, I would not agree with one of the statements that you made. I would not put in one basket Ukrainian shelling of the Russian refineries and the enterprises producing drones or other equipment necessary for the military purposes, and what is happening in the city of Belgorod. Because a lot of those news about the damages that are happening there, it's not Ukrainians who are shelling. So you don't need the buffer zone. We are not shelling the residential areas of Belgorod. Even with that building, with the tragedy of 13 or 15 people, how many we already had been confirmed as dead, all Russian media are talking that it was again the Russian bomb that just fell, and there are more and more
So what,
evidence.
it's this anti-Putin battalion that has been talked about in the past?
Yeah, I mean, Ukrainians in Belgorod been targeting the railway station and the few bases where they were ammunition depots, like saving of the equipment for the armed forces, because that city is one of those from where all attacks are happening against Ukraine. However, no the residential areas. But we already have approximately 20-30 incidents, with most of them perfectly in TikTok and other social networks posted by Russians themselves, how their own airplanes being just not effective in carrying the aerial bombs.
Very briefly on this, Michel Benamou.
Just to say, very difficult to have accurate wounded and killed numbers
On both sides.
On both sides. But there is one ratio that we seem to have right now on the battlefield. We have 1 Ukrainian for 1.5 Russian, which is why it's so difficult for Ukrainians to do more than defense in depth, which is what you see right now. Even with ammunitions, F-16, I don't think that Ukrainians can do a counteroffensive, for example. The best that they can do is slow down a Russians' offensive, which are disappointing as well. The Russians are not able to actually pierce through themselves.
All right, now the interest of the international community right now is on what's going on in Kharkiv and also what's going on at the Kremlin, a spring offensive coupled with what looks like a spring cleaning. Vladimir Putin sacking his old fishing buddy, Sergei Shoigu, as defense minister. I don't know if it's sacking, maybe it's kicking him upstairs to the head of National Security Council instead of Nikolai Patrushev. Anton Kozlov, care to dip into the dark art of Kremlinology here and explain to us what's going on? Sergei Shoigu no longer defense minister? What does it mean?
Well, I think it's quite clear because Shoigu was not a very efficient defense minister. The case of the Wagner mutiny last year clearly demonstrated that. Shoigu, I mean, he's a...
But that was a year ago. Wouldn't have Putin...
No, Putin doesn't do that.
Upstairs earlier?
No. He decided to wait. And now he's bringing Belousov, who is his former vice prime minister. He's an economist. He's a fairly well-known and respected economist. And it clearly points that the Russian military, in terms of its armament orders, in terms of the defense preparation, isn't doing that well. That's why they're bringing Belousov. I think that's a very clear sign that they need somebody who understands the economics of war and who will bring some kind of reshuffle. Because at this point, I mean, we just had a case of the Shoigu's vice deputy defense minister, Timur. Don't recall his last name.
The one who's sacked and arrested.
He was arrested, but it was a well-known case in Moscow for years that he's corrupt up to his ears. You know, Navalny did a story on him a few years ago, and they arrested him just now. So I think it's quite clear that all of those guys are very corrupt, and Putin understands that if he's not going to change something about it, his war effort may just end up in, it's going to anyways, but I mean, sooner than later, it's going to crash against the wall.
One technocrat in his stead as defense minister. Just explain that for our viewers, Michel Benamou.
Yes, here again, difficult to have the right numbers. We don't know exactly how much Russia spends for the war. Is it 8%? Some people say 30% of GDP. For the war machine. In any case, this man, the replacement of Shoigu Belousov, is going to handle a huge pocket of money that will be used against Ukraine, but that can also be used against other European targets or in the Arctic, for example. And so Europe should get ready. But when you look at Russia's GDP ratio, which is between 8 and 30%, and Europe, because we are at 1.6% of our GDP for defense, you can tell that there is a gap between how we are preparing for war and how the Russians are preparing for war.
Belousov is not a military guy. He's an expert in economic...
Neither was Shoigu when he took the job.
Right, but Belousov is an expert in economic planning. And that's why he is taking a board, because, I mean, he was vice prime minister for the economic innovation. And he was at one point the minister, I think, of economic innovations. But in any event, I think Russia has a very serious technological lag, including the military industry. And I think that's one reason why, and Putin is well aware of that. I mean, everybody is well aware of that.
No, it's true. Ukrainians.
Hannah Shelest, should the West be worried that it's a man who knows economic planning taking the reins of the defense ministry in Moscow?
You know, it's not just the man who knows economic, but at least what we already read about him, if it is not exaggerated, he is the person of much less corruption, if no corruption, at least no big scandals being found behind him. And the big corruption in the Russian armed forces, that what saves a lot of Ukrainian lives, let's be honest. So that's why less corruption is bad for us. The second is that he is the doctor of economics. He's not just economist. And all those people who have known him for 20 years, they said that he was very good in understanding the details and planning. And he is one of those who de facto saved Russian economy from sanctions, in addition to the head of the Central Bank of Russia. So if he would be able to make the order within the Russian Ministry of Defense, that would be very good for Russia. The only hope for the West is that those military people who are inside of the MOD, because Russian MOD is military, not civilian managers, they will be opposing him because he is the man from outside. So theoretically, in the next months, we will see, should it be any crises, clashes between the civilian and military component, old and new elite of the MOD, or he will manage to accommodate them.
All right, even before he was confirmed as Defense Minister, Andrei Belousov addressing Russian senators this Monday to argue for veterans' benefits. Let's take a listen.
I think it's a mess when participants in the special military operation who come back from holiday are driven from civilian medical institutions to hospitals, which are often simply overcrowded. This issue needs to be resolved.
All right, so retail politics there from the new defense minister. I ask the question again. Does it matter who the defense minister is, Andrei Kozlov?
Well, I think it does, of course, because I mean he's the leader of this ministry. But frankly, I think, you know, as they say, it's an old Russian proverb that the severity of Russian laws is compensated by the lack of their execution. So no matter who is going to head the defense ministry, the majority of the people who work there, they are. It's basically the rule of inertia.
And what happens? What happens to Nikolai Patrushev, who was the head of this National Security Council a long time, St. Petersburg insider who's known Vladimir Putin since the 1970s?
Well, I think in the end, I mean, he will. I don't know which position he will take or be appointed to, but I think what is important, he is Putin's close friend. He's going to stay Putin's close friend, might become his advisor. His son is now elevated to the ministerial position. So I think Putin is trying to create sort of the next stage because he's 72 years old. So something, you know, he's not going to stay forever, and he understands that. So something must be done about it. I think he's bringing, you know, a lot of loyalists, you know, abroad. Doesn't mean that they're going to be efficient. Doesn't mean that Patrushev's son is very efficient. But that's what, you know, this is Russia. You know, people are not efficient.
Seen from Kharkiv, Dmitry Kutovyi. The reshuffle in Moscow, your thoughts on it?
Look, you know, I'm absolutely sure that we do not care what the name of the Minister of Defense in Russia, because in my life was a period when I lived in Russia during almost 12 years, and I understand that the strategic of Putin power is just to make some strong, concrete of power, and it doesn't matter the names of these guys. It's just a rotation. One goes to other place, the second goes to this place, doesn't matter. But the problem is that no one in the world even considers real scenarios of the possible transformation of these archaic empires of the world. The world is frightened by the potential nuclear threat, especially if there is a change of power. The uncertainty of options for the future of Russia is the world, and any ideas in the Russian so-called liberal elites inhibit the adoption of very important decisions. We currently now preparing a new project, and we just making a platform for discussing options for the post-war transformation of Russia. Yes, we understand that Ukraine should become different after this war, strong, fiery, and free as possible. But security in Europe depends on whether Russia will also change, because all theses that Putin and corruption are to blame for everything are an illusion. So as for me, it's absolutely no difference.
Right. So there's the fear on the one hand. That's important. You're making two important points there. The fear of the unknown haunting the West, as well as the nuclear threats. The question then is Moscow's star power on the rise inside the former Soviet space? The other story, capturing the world's attention this Monday, is the third and final reading by Georgia's parliament of what the opposition likes to call the Russia Law, a bill that obliges media with funding from abroad to register as foreign agents. Michel Benamou, is this it's the question of which side is winning the hearts and minds at this point.
No, you're right, and the Russians have proved that they have been able to withstand sanctions, U.S. sanctions, also European support to Ukraine. I don't think that they have shown, tactical resilience. They have shown a lot of weakness on the battlefield. But definitely the situation is good for them with arms exports, for example, notably in India and in the rest of Asia. But I think they also have a lot to prove. This war against Ukraine has weakened them considerably, economically, also psychologically. I think there's also internal divisions that we cannot see because Russia is a dictatorship, but we know that there is a lot of tension between Moscow and the provinces. And so is Russia going to come out stronger from this war? It's difficult to say. It will also depend on us, on our reaction, and if we take the next steps seriously or not.
Hannah Celeste, the 2014, when the war begins, Ukraine's divided when it votes. Nearly half the population for one side, nearly half the other. You're in a Russian-speaking city. Of course, that has changed dramatically over the years. But your thoughts on the way, on Moscow's influence as, again, spring turns to summer in 2024?
Russian influence still exists because we need to understand that it's not the question of the language at all. You have even Russian ethnics or the Russian speakers who are bigger Ukrainian nationalists that can be some Ukrainians. So it's nothing about the language or ethnicity. It's more about the political culture. It's more about the certain preferences and relations towards corruption or some opposition to the reforms and everything connected with this. However, what we definitely can see that Russia is not working bluntly as it used to before 2022. Now it works more through the proxies. It started to work a lot even through the European proxies against Ukraine and in those countries. It works with economic methods. It works by bribes and collaborators in some of the places, but less and less successful, because when people see what is mean occupation, when people see that Russia is not even occupying some places but just destroying them, that's the best signal that people don't want to be within this paradigm.
Anton Kozlov?
No, I agree with Hannah. I think that the problem with this sort of Russian claims to the Ukrainian territory as well as the Ukrainian soul, mind, and body. I think there are a lot of words, but when it comes to real practice, I mean, I think it's so different. I mean, we may have an academic argument about, whether Ukrainians and Russians are the same or not the same people. But I mean, once you go to the terrain, it's going to see that, certainly they're not. That's the problem.
Now, a month from now, the posh Swiss resort of Bergenstock is due to host a peace conference for Ukraine. 160 nations invited. What's going to be the idea, Hannah Shelest, of that at a time when we talked earlier in our conversation about the challenges Ukraine faces in this war? What are you expecting from this conference next month?
This conference is not about the peace in Ukraine. It is much bigger because it is about the peace formula where 10 points are everything from the territorial integrity to the justice to food security and nuclear security. Those questions that the Russian aggression against Ukraine raised and demonstrated that the current UN system is definitely failed in many questions. That's why Ukraine managed to gather so many nations for the previous, like in Malta, there were more than 80 countries presented, because they are trying to set a certain, maybe not new rules, but at least to understand what to do when the nuclear power, for example, is threatening non-nuclear power.
So wait, this is not at all going to be about figuring out a way to end fighting?
No, this is first of all about setting the position of the civilized world against Russia. So if we would return back to the Second World War, that's something like a Tehran conference, where the nations started to think how they will live after the war, what should be done. Yes, there are some questions that are responding to the timely, like, for example, return of kidnapped kids. There are more than 20,000 of them kidnapped by Russia. But still, a lot of the questions discussed, that is about how the world and Europe should look after the hostilities are over.
What are you expecting, Michel Benamou?
Yes, I also think that this conference is going to be a follow-up to Emmanuel Macron's comments that Europe should send troops to Ukraine.
So there's a possibility.
This statement has made a lot of waves in Europe, and many people, notably in Germany yesterday, MPs from Germany, from Berlin, said that they would consider that NATO ensures air defenses, pushes NATO air defenses to Ukraine, especially in the west of Ukraine, to protect Ukraine's industries and some population centers. And so this is also going to be one of the consequences, the effect to watch carefully. What will NATO do concretely? Will NATO intervene directly in this conflict or not?
Anton Kozlov?
Well, I don't think there will be any tangible, practical results, because we've seen that kind of events before, unless it's going to be about concrete planning of what's to do next. It's going to be a lot of blah blah, similar to the Chinese peace plan, you know.
Dmitry Kutovyi, before we go, tell us right now, with the fighting, a few dozen kilometers away from where you're sitting, what is it that you would like to see the international community come together and do?
Look, I have to specify that I think, and I'm absolutely sure that it's vital to include the discussion of the future transformation of Russia during the peace summit, especially after some of European countries say that Putin is not a democracy-voted president of Russia Federation. So I know personally too many different people from Russia allies from some different nations, and they say, like Erdika, like others part of militaries and civilian society in Russia, they say that is not the country. Russia Federation is not the real country. And we have to understand that if we will talk in tradition that, yes, Russia will push us 30 kilometers from the border, and it will be a new negotiations about some new peace agreement or something else. It doesn't work in real world. We have to understand that the only way to decide this problem of in Europe and in the peace in the world, and the question of peace, the question of transformation of Russia Federation and transformation of Ukraine. We try to do our part, but we need your help in this. And every day we see the examples of absolutely archaic politics, and it's really funny to discuss what the name of Minister of Defense, of what the name of blah blah blah, and absolutely doesn't matter. Russia is a last archaic empire in the world. And we have to understand together how we have to help them to
change. We have to leave it there,
to change.
unfortunately. Dmitry Kutovyi, thank you so much for joining us from Kharkiv. Good luck with your with your help with the civilians there in the northeast of the country over the next few days. Hannah Shelest, I want to thank you for being with us from Odessa. Michel Benamou, Anton Kozlov, thank you for being with us here in the France 24.